Hey there, weary travelers. Thanks for joining me for tonight's tale. If you're new around here, I'd be grateful if you'd hit that subscribe button. It's the fuel that keeps these eerie stories rolling out of my mind and into your ears. While you're at it, drop a comment below and tell me where you're tuning in from. I love knowing where my listeners are scattered across this wild world. All right, settle in, because tonight's story is a slow burn that'll crawl under your skin. Let's get to it. My name's Elias Carter, and I'm a long-haul trucker by trade. That morning, I'd rolled out of the depot just as the sun peeked over the horizon, hauling a load bound for a bustling city out east. The sky hung heavy with a soft gray blanket. Nothing too ominous, just a hint that the weather might turn sour later. The forecast had mumbled something about afternoon storms, but I've driven through worse, so I brushed it off. My rig rumbled onto the interstate under those overcast skies. The plan is simple as they come. Reach the city by dusk, drop the cargo, then crash at a truck stop for the night. Routine stuff. The radio hummed with classic rock, and the chatter on the CB was the usual mix of grumbles and road gossip. Nothing worth a second thought. I'd been rolling for a few hours, the miles slipping by in a steady rhythm, when the emergency alert system tore through my tunes like a jagged knife. That shrill, piercing beep sliced the air, snuffing out the guitar riff I'd been nodding along to. At first, I figured it was just another weather warning. Those pop up often enough on these long stretches, but the voice that followed wasn't rattling off wind speeds or flash flood risks. No, this was different. The announcer's tone was clipped, urgent, warning of a contagious situation, spreading fast, and throwing order out the window. They urged folks to stay inside, steer clear of anyone acting unusually aggressive, and keep their radios on for more news. I blinked at the dashboard, half expecting the station to flip back to normal after a glitch. But when I twisted the dial, every channel echoed the same grim message, each voice sounding more mechanical than the last. Confusion hit me first, then a flicker of unease. I've heard plenty of oddball alerts over the years, tornadoes, chemical spills, you name it, but this felt off, like the world had tilted just a hair too far. I shook it off, told myself to stay sharp, and kept my eyes on the road. My best bet was to stick to the route and watch for any signs, literal or otherwise, that something was brewing. Traffic stayed light for a while, the highway stretching out like a gray ribbon under the thickening clouds. But as I neared a sprawling overpass, a beast of concrete and steel that always bottlenecks on busy days, things started to shift. Cars piled up ahead, more than usual, their taillights glowing red in long, uneven chains. It wasn't rush hour, but the flow slowed to a crawl, then a full-on standstill. I eased my rig to a stop in the middle lane, boxed in by a beat-up hatchback on my left and a shiny SUV up front. Horns blared sporadically, a chorus of impatience ringing out, but nobody was going anywhere. The CB crackled to life, voices overlapping in a frantic tangle. They're closing exits up ahead, one driver barked. Heard the cops are locking down the whole interchange, another chimed in. Someone else, voice tight with nerves, said, "Get off the main drag if you can. Take the back roads." Easier said than done. We were pinned in a gridlock that stretched beyond the curve of the overpass, a sprawling maze of metal and glass with no way out. The sky darkened further, the gray deepening into a bruised shade that promised rain. I leaned back in my seat, scanning the scene from my perch. Ahead, the overpass loomed, its shadow cutting across the stalled traffic. From up here, I could see the mess unfold, rows of vehicles mashed together, merging into a single choked artery. The CB popped again. They're saying avoid crowds. This highway's a damn sardine can. The words landed heavy, a knot forming in my gut. I flipped back to FM, and that same emergency voice droned on, repeating its orders. Stay indoors if you can, hunker down if you can't. Fat chance of that. We were stranded out here, exposed on this asphalt slab, and the contradiction in their advice gnawed at me. If something was coming, we were sitting ducks. Time dragged on, the heat creeping up as engines idled or shut off to save gas. Drivers started stepping out, doors creaking open along the line. Some paced between cars, stretching stiff legs. Others craned their necks, searching for a hint of movement up ahead. I stayed put, my cab still a safe island in the growing unease. Through the windshield, I squinted toward the horizon. Half a mile out, past the overpass, something flickered, a blur of motion too far to pin down. People running, maybe? Panic stabbed at the edges of my mind, but the distance muddied the details. Then, like a wave breaking, a ripple of alarms surged through the jam. Shouts erupted, sharp and jagged, followed by the hollow thud of a crash somewhere up the line. I grabbed the CB mic, my voice steady despite the pulse hammering in my ears. "Anyone got a clear view up there? What's going on?" Static buzzed, then a shaky reply cut through. "They're losing it. People are flipping out. They don't look right." Another voice, calmer but clipped, added, "Folks are running from a group on foot. They're hurt. Or sick. Maybe, but they're coming at people. Lock your doors." That word, sick, hung in the air, tying back to the alert's warning about aggression. My hand drifted to the door locks, double-checking they were secure, windows rolled tight. Whatever was unfolding, I wasn't about to wade into it. The chaos crept closer. A figure bolted from a car near the front, darting between vehicles, then vanishing into the gridlock. Screams pierced the din, raw and desperate. I leaned forward, gripping the wheel, trying to piece it together. Shadows shifted between the cars, stumbling, erratic shapes that didn't move like they should. One slammed into a sedan's fender, barely flinching before lurching onward. Drivers who'd stepped out froze, then scrambled back to their vehicles, doors banging shut. Engines roared as some tried to nudge onto the shoulder, but the jam was too thick, a wall of steel holding us in place. A woman's voice crackled over the CB, trembling but clear. "They're attacking anything that moves up here. Keep your cab sealed." My eyes darted to the SUV ahead. A guy was wrestling with the rear door, kids' faces pressed to the glass, wide-eyed and frantic. He was yelling something I couldn't hear, his hands fumbling to keep them calm. Then, out of nowhere, a man sprinted from the left lane, slamming into my passenger door. "Let me in," he bellowed, pounding the metal with sweat-slick fists. His face was a mask of terror, eyes wild, clothes clinging to him like he'd run through hell. I hesitated. Instinct screamed to keep the cab locked, but his pleas cut through. I hit the unlock button, and he scrambled up, collapsing into the seat beside me. "Thanks," he gasped, chest heaving. "They're tearing into everyone out there. They won't stop, won't listen." I scanned the cab, making sure we had room, then locked the door again. "Name's Jake," he muttered, though the word barely stuck in my head amid the noise. "They're sick, real bad. Saw him go after people like animals." He pointed ahead, where the commotion was swelling. "We gotta get off this road." I glanced at the shoulder. Guardrails hemmed us in, and the traffic was a solid block. "No dice," I said. "We're stuck unless something gives." The next few minutes blurred into a haze of radio chatter and rising panic. The CB buzzed with overlapping cries. "Cops are on the overpass." "No, they're miles off. Sirens are all I hear." I craned my neck, searching for flashing lights, but the horizon offered nothing but gray and chaos. Jake stared out the window, knuckles white. Ahead, a wave of people broke free, fleeing on foot. Some clambered over hoods, others squeezed through gaps, desperate to escape whatever was closing in. Between the cars, those shambling figures pressed forward, relentless and unyielding. A shiver ran through me as the truth sank in. This wasn't a traffic jam anymore. It was a trap. The EAS had warned of a spreading sickness, and now it was here, clawing its way through the gridlock. Jake's voice dropped low. "We can't stay here." He was right, but the highway had us caged. Beyond the windshield, the SUV's driver bolted, abandoning his kids for a split second before doubling back. Shadows swarmed closer, and the screams grew louder. Whatever was coming, it was fast, and it wasn't stopping. The cab of my rig felt like a steel cocoon, sealed tight against the chaos clawing its way closer. Jake hunched in the passenger seat, his breaths ragged, eyes darting between the windshield and the side mirror. Outside, the highway had morphed into a battlefield of stalled cars and frantic bodies. The SUV ahead rocked as its driver, some poor guy trying to shield his kids, fought to keep the doors shut. Shadows lurched between the vehicles, their movements jerky, like puppets with cut strings. The CB radio spat out a mess of voices, panic bleeding through the static. They're everywhere up front. Someone yelled. Can't tell who's sick and who's just scared. Stay in your rigs. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles whitening, trying to stitch together a plan. The overpass loomed half a mile ahead, a concrete giant casting a long, cold shadow over the gridlock. Beyond it, the commotion I'd glimpsed earlier was sharpening into focus, people sprinting, falling, scrambling over hoods in a desperate bid to escape. Horns blared nonstop, a useless symphony of frustration, while the sky churned darker, the air thick with the threat of rain. Jake pounded the dashboard, voice low and urgent. We've got to move, Elias. They're closing in. I shot him a look, then nodded at the wall of cars pinning us in. Tell me how. Guardrails on one side, traffic on the other, were boxed. He leaned forward, scanning the shoulder through the window. There's got to be a gap somewhere, maintenance break, emergency lane, something. His words hung there, a fragile thread of hope. I twisted in my seat, peering through the driver's side mirror. The line of vehicles stretched back forever, but maybe 50 yards behind us. The concrete barrier flinched, a narrow slit, barely wide enough for a pickup, let alone my rig. It might have been for utility crews or a runoff path, but it was the only crack in this prison of asphalt and steel. That's it, I said, pointing. If we can back up, I might squeeze through. Jake's eyes flickered with doubt, but he nodded. Better than sitting here. The CB crackled again, a woman's voice cutting through. They're swarming the front, abandoned cars blocking everything. Reverse if you can. I checked my mirrors. Behind me, a sedan hugged my trailer's tail, leaving maybe a foot of wiggle room. Reversing in this mess was a long shot, but staying put felt like signing our names on a death warrant. The shouts outside grew sharper, laced with terror, and a metallic bang rang out as something or someone slammed into a nearby car. I shifted into neutral, weighing our odds. The EAS droned on the FM band, that same robotic voice looping its warnings. Avoid contact. Stay secure. Monitor updates. Hollow advice when you're trapped in a sea of stalled engines and rising panic. Drivers were abandoning their posts now, doors flung wide as people bolted on foot. Some climbed onto roofs, others darted between lanes, clutching bags or nothing at all. Ahead, the SUV's driver cracked his window, shouting at someone or something before yanking it shut again. Then I saw them clearer. Figures staggering forward, faces blank but bodies relentless, crashing into anything in their path. They're infected, Jake muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Saw it up close before I ran. I was all wrong, like they're not even human anymore. My gut twisted. The alert had hinted at a sickness tied to aggression, and this fit the bill too well. A loud thud jolted us both. Something hit the trailer's side. Hard. I glanced in the mirror and caught a glimpse of a figure stumbling away, dazed but undeterred. Infected or just panicked, I couldn't tell, but it didn't matter. They were coming, and we were still here. We're moving, I said, resolve hardening. You guide me, get those cars behind us to shift. Jake hesitated, his hand hovering over the door handle. Out there, he asked, eyeing the growing chaos. No choice, I replied. Stay low, signal him to back off. I'll inch us toward that gap. He took a shaky breath, then popped the passenger door, slipping out with a crouch. I watched him weave toward the sedan behind us, arms waving, shouting words drowned by the cacophony of horns and screams. Through the mirror, I saw the sedan's driver, a middle-aged woman with a tight grip on her wheel, nod and ease her car back a few feet. The pickup in the next lane followed suit, tires crunching gravel as it edged away. A sliver of space opened, fragile but real. I shifted into reverse, easing the rig backward. Mirrors my only lifeline. The trailer groaned, wheels rolling slow as molasses. Jake darted between cars, gesturing like a frantic conductor, coaxing more drivers to clear a path. For a fleeting second, it felt like we might pull it off, a tiny spark of teamwork flickering in the mess. Then the spark died. A fresh wave of shouts erupted from the front, louder, closer. I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. A horde of those shambling figures spilled toward us, a disjointed tide crashing against the gridlock. They barreled into cars, fists pounding metal, some clawing at windows with blood-streaked hands. Drivers who'd been helping Jake spun around, abandoning their posts to fend off the onslaught. The SUV ahead shuddered as two infected slammed into it, the guy inside swinging a tire iron through the cracked window. His kids screamed, their voices piercing the din. Jake bolted back, pounding my door. "Let me in," he yelled, face ashen. I hit the unlock, and he scrambled up, slamming the door behind him. "They're everywhere, too fast," he panted. I cursed under my breath, shoving the rig into reverse again. The trailer lurched back another few feet, but the gap was shrinking. Cars behind us were locking up as drivers panicked. A pickup in the left lane rammed the guardrail, its driver mirroring my plan, desperate for that maintenance break. Metal screeched as his tailgate scraped concrete, sparks spitting into the gloom. The infected closed in, their numbers swelling. One latched onto a hatchback's door, yanking it open. The driver stumbled out, only to vanish under a tangle of flailing limbs. Another climbed a sedan's hood, smashing the windshield with bare hands, oblivious to the glass shredding its skin. I inched the rig back, heart hammering, the trailer's rear flirting with that narrow gap. "We're almost there," I growled, more to myself than Jake. He gripped the CB mic, pleading into it. "Anyone who can, clear the lane, give us room." A few garbled replies came back, but the frequency was a mess, screams, static, and overlapping cries swallowing any hope of order. A loud crack split the air, the SUV's window caved, and the infected surged inside. The driver's shouts cut off, drowned by his kids' wails. I forced my eyes away, focusing on the mirrors. The maintenance break was close, 30 yards, maybe less, but the rig's bulk made every inch a fight. Thunder rumbled overhead, the first fat drops of rain smacking the windshield. The storm was here, wrapping the highway in a shroud of wet gray that blurred the carnage. "We've got no time," Jake said, voice trembling but firm. "Push it." I gritted my teeth, nudging the accelerator. The trailer scraped the barrier's edge, a grinding screech tearing through the cab as metal kissed concrete. Sparks flashed, the rig shuddering under the strain. Ahead, the overpass swarmed with fleeing figures, some running, some staggering, the line between victim and threat dissolving. A woman darted down the shoulder, bag bouncing on her back, only to vanish as an infected lunged from behind a car. The CB buzzed with a final plea. "They're breaking through. Get out if you can." I didn't look back. The gap was all that mattered. With a jolt, the trailer caught, snagging on a jagged chunk of barrier. The rig stalled, tires spinning uselessly. Jake cursed, slamming his fist on the dash. "Come on." I eased off, realigned the wheel, and tried again. The trailer bucked, then popped free, swinging wide as we teetered toward the service lane beyond. Rain hammered down now, a steady drumbeat against the roof, washing the world into a smear of motion and shadow. I gunned it, slow and deliberate, navigating past a clutter of cones and a parked utility truck. The highway receded behind us, a fading nightmare framed in the mirrors. Jake stared back, his reflection pale in the glass. "We made it," he whispered, disbelief threading his words. I didn't reply. The service lane stretched ahead, empty and slick, curving beneath a smaller overpass. Water dripped from above, pooling on the asphalt, but no infected roamed here, not yet. Relief flickered, but it was thin, brittle. We'd slipped the trap, but safety was a ghost on this road. The EAS looped its hollow warnings, and the rain kept falling, a quiet shroud over the chaos we'd left behind. Wherever this lane led, it was a start, but the storm wasn't done with us yet. The service lane unspooled beneath my rig's tires, a narrow ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting away from the highway's chaos. Rain streaked the windshield, a steady patter that muffled the world outside, but it couldn't drown the echoes of what we'd left behind. Screams, pounding fists, the grind of metal on concrete. Jake sat rigid in the passenger seat, his eyes locked on the side mirror as the gridlocked overpass shrank into a gray smear. "How'd it fall apart so fast?" he muttered, voice barely audible over the engine's growl. I didn't have an answer. The EAS bulletins had warned of a contagious madness, but seeing it tear through that traffic jam made it real in a way words couldn't touch. We rolled past a rusted chain-link fence, the lane weaving around orange barrels and faded construction signs. The path dipped under a smaller overpass, water dripping from its joints like a leaking wound, splashing across the hood. My headlights carved through the gloom, catching glints of wet pavement and little else. No infected staggered here, no cars blocked the way, just an eerie stillness that felt too good to trust. I kept the rig at a cautious crawl, hands tight on the wheel, every shadow a potential threat. Jake fiddled with the radio, chasing a signal through static. The EAS voice cut in again, same old script, stay indoors, avoid highways, wait for updates. "Like that helps us now," he snorted, twisting the dial to the CB. The chatter was thinner here, voices fainter but no less rattled. "Managed to peel off near exit 47. A trucker rasped. It's a damn mess back there. Folks turning on each other. Another broke in. Saw him overrun a rest stop 10 miles west. Keep moving if you can." Jake glanced at me, his jaw tight. "We can't stop here," he said. "If those things wander off the main drag, these back roads won't stay clear long." He was right. The highway might have been a death trap, but this quiet was temporary, a breather, not a haven. I nodded, eyes flicking to the fuel gauge. Half a tank. Enough to roam, but not forever. The lane spilled into a neglected stretch of industrial sprawl. Warehouses with boarded windows, fences sagging under years of rust, signs faded to ghosts of their former selves. It felt like driving through a graveyard of better days, the rain painting everything in shades of despair. I spotted a gravel lot beside one of the buildings, wide enough to park the rig without boxing us in. "Let's pull over," I said. "Check the lay of the land, figure our next move." Jake didn't argue. I swung the truck into the lot, easing it near the warehouse's edge, engine idling low. The building stared back, dark, hollow, tagged with graffiti, but it offered a wall to lean against, a pause from the endless running. We sat there a minute, listening. Rain tapped the cab's roof, a soft rhythm against the silence beyond. No footsteps, no shouts, just the hum of the engine and our own uneven breaths. Jake cracked the window an inch, letting in the damp air, then tuned the CB again. A few drivers traded tales of narrow escapes, their voices threading a grim tapestry. Highways choked with wrecks, towns locking down, infected roaming in packs. "Sounds like it's everywhere," he said, slumping back. "Not just the overpass." I nodded, chewing on the thought. The EAS hadn't given a scope, just vague warnings, but the pieces were piling up. Whatever this was, it was spreading fast, and we were out here blind. "Let's scout it," I said, killing the engine to save fuel. "See if this place holds up." Jake grabbed a flashlight from his bag, a beat-up thing he'd snagged before climbing into my cab, and we stepped out, boots crunching gravel. The rain had eased to a drizzle, leaving the air muggy and thick. I circled the rig, checking the trailer, cargo intact, straps still tight despite our rough exit. Jake swept the light along the warehouse's perimeter, its beam catching broken glass and weeds clawing through cracked pavement. No movement, no signs of life. The place was a shell, abandoned long before whatever hell broke loose today. Back in the cab, we hashed out a plan. "There's a smaller highway south of here," I said, recalling the map I'd glimpsed earlier. Less traffic. Might still be open. Jake nodded. Beats circling back to that mess. Anything's better than sitting still. We fired up the rig and rolled out, threading through the industrial maze. The streets were tight, lined with skeletal buildings and parked cars that hadn't moved in weeks, maybe months. Rain picked up again, drumming harder, the wipers slapping a steady beat. The further we went, the more the world felt deserted, like we'd slipped into a pocket the chaos hadn't touched yet. After a few miles, a flicker of light pierced the dark, a convenience store, its neon, open sign buzzing faintly. A handful of cars sat in the lot, engines off, windows fogged. Fuel and info, Jake said, perking up. Worth a stop. I waited. Risky, but we needed both. You check inside, I said. I'll watch the rig. He nodded, slipping out into the rain, his silhouette shrinking as he approached the store. I kept the engine running, eyes sweeping the lot. Every shadow made me flinch, every gust of wind a potential threat. Minutes stretched, my grip tightening on the wheel, until Jake finally emerged, a plastic bag dangling from one hand. He climbed in, dripping wet, his face a mix of relief and worry. Clerk's freaking out, he said, tossing the bag between us. Chips, water, a candy bar. Says nearby towns are going dark. Roads blocked, people acting crazy. Told me to stay off the main routes. I frowned, cracking a water bottle. What about south? Jake shrugged. Didn't know specifics, but said rural stuff might still be clear. No promises. It wasn't much, but it was a thread. We peeled out, headlights slicing through the downpour, aiming for that southern highway. The map on my phone flickered, signal weak, but it pointed us toward a thin line cutting through farmland. A lifeline, maybe. The rain thickened, turning the world into a blur of wet green and black. We passed fields and tree lines, the road empty save for a pickup that roared by in the opposite direction, taillights fading fast. The CB grew quieter, the chatter thinning as we put distance between us and the city. The EAS looped its warnings, adding a new wrinkle. Travel restrictions in effect. Move only if essential. Jake smirked grimly. Guess we're essential now. I didn't laugh. Staying alive felt essential enough. Hours slipped by, the storm a constant companion. We spotted a sign for a rest area, a barebones lot with vending machines and a bathroom shed. A lone sedan sat parked, dark and silent. Rest stop? Jake asked. I nodded. Quick break, then we push on. I pulled in, parking near the exit, engine off. The rain's rhythm filled the cab, a deceptive calm settling over us. Jake cracked his window, listening. Quiet out there, he said. Too quiet, I thought, but didn't say it. We split a bag of chips, trading a few words. He mentioned family out of state, hoping to reach them if the roads held. I just wanted a wall between me and this mess, a place to ride it out. The EAS cut in again, same spiel, no hope. We took turns keeping watch, though sleep dodged us both. Every creak of the rig, every flash of lightning, jerked us alert. I stepped out once, stretching my legs, the drizzle cool on my face. The trailer was fine, cargo secure, but the silence gnawed at me. Back inside, Jake took the wheel's shadow, staring into the dark. We should keep moving, he said after a while. Find a real stop, truck plaza, motel, something solid. I agreed. The rest area was a pause, not a fix. We cranked the engine and rolled out, headlights piercing the night, the rural highway stretching ahead like a lifeline fraying at the edges. Dawn crept in slow, a pale smear through the clouds. The rain eased, leaving puddles that shimmered under our tires. We passed farmhouses set back from the road, dark, lifeless, their owners either gone or hunkered down. A gas station loomed ahead, its canopy lights blazing, a single car fueling up. Top off? I asked. Jake nodded. I pulled beside a diesel pump, scanning the lot as the other car peeled out, vanishing into the gray. We fueled fast, the store locked tight with a closed, Emergency sign slapped on the door. Empty shelves peeked through the glass. Someone had cleaned it out. We didn't linger, climbing back in with full tanks and a fragile sense of momentum. The road stretched on, silent but for the engine's hum and the radio's endless loop. Jake stared ahead, lost in thought. I kept driving, the memory of the overpass clawing at me. Those kids in the SUV, the infected swarming, the helplessness of it all. Whatever this sickness was, it had teeth, and it was chewing through everything I knew. South was our bet now, a faint hope in a world turning dark. The rig rumbled forward, rain slick and steady, carrying us deeper into the unknown. The rural highway stretched out like a threadbare lifeline, its edges frayed by fields and skeletal trees bowing under the weight of dawn's gray light. Rain had dwindled to a faint mist, leaving the asphalt slick and shimmering under my rig's headlights. Jake sat beside me, his silhouette rigid against the passenger window, eyes tracing the emptiness beyond. We'd been rolling for hours, dodging the chaos of the overpass and weaving through backroads that felt more like memories than routes. The CB hummed with faint voices, truckers swapping tales of blocked roads and lost towns. But the chatter was sparse now, swallowed by static and distance. The EAS bulletins droned on, a broken record of warnings: stay put, avoid contact, wait for help that never seemed to come. We'd fueled up at that lonely gas station, the bright canopy a fleeting beacon before we plunged back into the dark. The tank was full, but my mind wasn't. Images of the highway jam gnawed at me, those kids in the SUV, the infected tearing through like a tide of rage. Jake broke the silence, voice low. You think it's everywhere by now? I shrugged, hands steady on the wheel. Radio says it's spreading. Doesn't say how far. He nodded, staring at the dashboard like it might spill answers. My sister's out west. If I can get to her. He trailed off, hope a thin thread stretched too tight. A sign flickered in the headlights. Hopper's Junction, 5 miles, a speck of a town, maybe a couple thousand souls if the faded paint was honest. Worth a look? I asked. Jake shifted, peering ahead. Could be a spot to hole up, get our bearings. Better than driving blind. I agreed. The rig rumbled onward, the road dipping past a cluster of barns, their roofs sagging like tired shoulders. No lights glowed in the windows, no smoke curled from chimneys, just a stillness that felt too heavy, like the world holding its breath. The mist thickened, curling around the tires, and the air carried a damp chill that seeped through the cab's cracks. We rolled into Hopper's Junction at a crawl, the town unfolding in muted shades of gray. A main street cut through it, 2 lanes flanked by a diner, a hardware store, a post office, all shuttered tight. A few cars sat parked, tires flat or doors ajar, abandoned in haste. Quiet, Jake muttered, hand resting on the flashlight he'd kept close. Too quiet. I thought again, but kept it to myself. Ahead, a truck stop glowed faintly, a low brick building with a gravel lot, 3 rigs parked unevenly near the pumps. The sign flickered, junction rest. That's our spot, I said, easing the rig toward it, parking near the exit lane. The engine growled to a stop, and silence rushed in, broken only by the soft tick of cooling metal. We sat a moment, scanning the lot. 2 drivers lingered near their cabs, faces drawn, exchanging low words. A third stepped from the building, a thermos clutched in his hand, eyes darting like he'd seen too much. Seems calm, Jake said, unconvinced. For now, I replied, grabbing my jacket. Let's check inside. We climbed out, boots crunching gravel, the air sharp with the scent of diesel and wet earth. The other drivers glanced our way, wary nods, no greetings. One, a grizzled guy with a beard like steel wool, muttered, "You from the city run?" I nodded. Overpass went to hell. He grunted. Same up north. Whole damn state's a mess. Inside, the truck stop hummed with a generator's faint buzz. A lone cashier, a wiry woman with tired eyes, stood behind the counter, a radio crackling beside her. Shelves were half empty, picked clean by earlier travelers, but a rack of snacks and a cooler of water remained. "You open?" I asked. She shrugged. "Barely. Folks been through all day. Most headed out fast. Stock's low, but take what you need." Jake grabbed a couple granola bars and a bottle, while I snagged coffee from a dented pot. "What's the word around here?" I asked, leaning on the counter. She sighed, tapping the radio. "Same as everywhere. Roads closing, people going nuts. Heard the interstate's a graveyard now. Haven't seen cops or nothing since yesterday." Back at the rig, we split the haul, sipping coffee that tasted more like grit than comfort. The other drivers milled outside, their voices a low murmur. One claimed he'd passed a town gone dark, lights out, streets empty save for shambling figures. Another said he'd dodged a pileup 30 miles east, infected swarming the wrecks. "They don't stop," he said, voice hollow. "Just keep coming." Jake frowned, crumpling his wrapper. "We stay here, we're a target. Too many rigs in one spot." I nodded. "But moving blinds no better. Let's rest, then head for quieter ground, someplace off the map." We climbed back into the cab, locking the doors, the faint glow of the truck's stop a lifeline in the gloom. The EAS cut through again. "Avoid gatherings. Isolate if possible." Ironic, given the handful of us clustered here, but it beat the highway's chaos. We took shifts, Jake first, me slumped against the window, eyes half open. Sleep dodged me, every creak of the rig or distant rumble snapping me alert. The memory of the overpass clung like damp rot. Those screams, the infected clawing through, the SUV's glass shattering. I wondered about that family, then pushed it down. Wondering didn't change a thing. My shift came as the sky lightened, a pale smear bleeding through the mist. Jake stirred, rubbing his eyes. "Anything?" he asked. "Just quiet," I said, scanning the lot. The other drivers had thinned, one rig gone, the others still parked, their owners inside or asleep. I stepped out, stretching, the air cool and heavy. The trailer was secure, cargo untouched, but the stillness felt wrong, like a held breath before a scream. Back inside, Jake tuned the CB, catching a faint voice. "Small roads are holding south of here. Stay off the big ones." It was thin, but it was something. "We push on," I said, firing the engine. "Find a crossroads, maybe a hideout." Jake nodded, pointing to a faded map he'd snagged from the store. 20 miles, there's a turnoff. Leads to some nowhere towns. Might buy us time." We rolled out. The truck stopped, fading in the mirrors. The road ahead a gray tunnel through rolling hills. The mist clung low, wrapping fields and fence lines in a shroud, and the silence deepened, broken only by the rig's steady rumble. A farmhouse flickered by, dark, lifeless. Then another, their windows blind eyes staring at nothing. The EAS looped its warnings, adding a new edge. Reports of outbreaks in rural zones. Exercise extreme caution. Jake's jaw tightened. Rural zones. That's us. I gripped the wheel harder, eyes flicking to the mirrors. The road stayed empty, but the quiet felt loaded now, a trap waiting to spring. We hit the crossroads, an unmarked split, one path veering toward a grain silo, the other lost in a copse of trees. "Left," Jake said, tracing the map. "Keeps us off the grid." I turned, the rig swaying as we plunged deeper into nowhere, the world shrinking to pavement and shadow. Midday crept in, the mist burning off to reveal a bruised sky. A sign loomed, Cedar Hollow, Pop 1800, and we slowed, the town unfolding in a scatter of clapboard houses and a shuttered gas station. No movement, no life. "Looks dead," Jake said, voice tight. "Or hiding," I replied, parking near a vacant lot. We sat there, engine off, listening. A crow cawed somewhere, the sound sharp against the hush. "We stay alert," I said. "Rest here, then decide." Jake nodded, but his eyes stayed on the horizon, searching for ghosts. Hours passed, the day fading to dusk. The CB crackled with a lone voice. Cedar's quiet, too quiet. Watch yourselves. We traded watch again, the rig our fragile fortress. Night fell, and the ES droned on. No rescue, no end, just caution and static. I thought of the overpass, the minivan's fate, the highway's collapse. It was a scar now, a warning etched in every mile we'd run. Jake spoke softly, breaking the trance. We'll make it, right? I didn't answer, just stared into the dark. The road ahead was a question, the past a weight, and safety a dream slipping through our fingers. That's all for now, folks. If this tale gripped you, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Stay sharp, stay quiet, and trust nothing, not even the stillness. Until next time.